What if I told you that one ordinary afternoon became one of the most extraordinary moments in Abraham's entire life? A day that began with rest, but ended with a promise renewed, a city condemned, and a conversation so remarkable that it continues to inspire believers thousands of years later. Because Genesis chapter 18 is not merely a story about hospitality. It is a story about impossible promises, divine justice, and the power of standing in the gap for others. And before this chapter ends, one question will echo through history, a question every believer must eventually answer. Is anything too hard for me? The sun stood high over the plains of Mamre. The heat of the day settled upon the land. Abraham sat quietly at the entrance of his tent. To any observer, it appeared to be an ordinary day, but heaven had other plans. As Abraham lifted his eyes, he saw 3 men standing nearby. They seemed to appear suddenly, unexpectedly, mysteriously, and immediately Abraham sensed something extraordinary. Without hesitation, he ran to meet them. Notice something remarkable. Abraham was nearly 100 years old, yet he ran, not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of honor, out of hospitality, out of reverence. He bowed himself to the ground and invited them to stay. Water was brought, feet were washed, shade was offered beneath a tree. Food was prepared. Abraham hurried into the tent and called for Sarah. Fresh bread was made, a choice calf was prepared, butter and milk were served. Everything was done quickly, generously, wholeheartedly. This was not merely hospitality. This was a reflection of Abraham's character. The same man who trusted my promises also welcomed strangers with generosity. And often, people do not realize that some of life's greatest blessings arrive disguised as ordinary moments. As the meal continued, one of the visitors asked a simple question: "Where is Sarah?" The question itself revealed something important. These visitors knew far more than ordinary travelers should know. Sarah was inside the tent, listening, watching, waiting. Then came the announcement. The promise Abraham had heard before would be repeated again, but this time with greater clarity than ever before. At the appointed time, within the next year, Sarah would have a son. Pause and imagine that moment. Sarah was listening from inside the tent, 90 years old, long past childbearing age, years of disappointment behind her, decades of unanswered longing. And now she hears a promise that seems impossible. Her response was immediate. She laughed, not aloud, not openly, but within herself. The promise seemed too incredible, too unrealistic, too far beyond what human reason could accept. After all these years, at this age, could such a thing truly happen? Perhaps many people understand Sarah's reaction because there are moments when my promises seem larger than human understanding, moments when faith struggles against experience, moments when hope wrestles with reality. Yet I addressed Abraham. Why did Sarah laugh? Is anything too hard for the Lord? There it is, the question at the center of the chapter. Not merely for Sarah, not merely for Abraham, but for every generation. Is anything too hard for me? The answer has never changed. What appears impossible to humanity remains possible with me. What appears hopeless can be restored. What appears dead can live again. What appears beyond reach can be accomplished according to my purpose. Sarah denied laughing. Fear gripped her heart, but I gently revealed the truth. Yes, you did laugh, not as condemnation, but as a reminder. I see what others cannot see. I know every hidden thought, every secret doubt, every unspoken fear, yet my promises remain unchanged. Then the atmosphere shifted. The conversation turned from promise to judgment. The visitors rose and looked toward Sodom, and suddenly the chapter moves from the future of Abraham's family to the fate of an entire city. Remember Lot, the nephew who chose the fertile plains, the man who pitched his tent toward Sodom, the city that seemed prosperous, successful, attractive. Now that city stood on the edge of destruction. The cries against Sodom and Gomorrah had reached heaven. Their wickedness was great, their corruption severe. The time for judgment was approaching. But before proceeding, I revealed my intentions to Abraham. Why? Because Abraham was not merely my servant. He was my friend, the father of a future nation, a man entrusted with my covenant. I knew the kind of leader Abraham would become. He would teach his children. He would pursue justice. He would guide future generations in my ways. And so I shared with him what was coming. Then something extraordinary happened. Abraham stepped forward, not in rebellion, not in defiance, but in compassion. His heart immediately turned toward the people who might be affected, especially Lot and his family. And so Abraham began one of the most remarkable conversations recorded in Scripture. Will you destroy the righteous with the wicked? The question was sincere. The concern was genuine. Abraham understood my justice, but he also appealed to my mercy. Suppose 50 righteous people are found within the city. Would you spare it? Yes, I would. Then Abraham continued, what about 45, 40, 30, 20, 10? Each time Abraham drew nearer. Each time he asked again. Each time I answered. Imagine the humility of this moment. Abraham repeatedly acknowledged his position. I am but dust and ashes. Yet he continued speaking. Why? Because love compels action. Compassion refuses silence. Intercession stands in the gap. This conversation reveals something beautiful about prayer. Prayer is not merely presenting requests. Prayer is participating in my purposes. Prayer is caring about what I care about. Prayer is allowing your heart to align with mine. Notice something else. Abraham never asks for special treatment. He never asks for personal gain. He pleads for others, for strangers, for cities, for people who may never know he prayed for them. This is the heart of intercession. The chapter ends with a solemn reality. The conversation concludes. The decision remains. The visitors continue towards Sodom. And Abraham returns home, but nothing is the same. The promise has been reaffirmed. Sarah will have a son. The impossible is about to become reality, and judgment is moving toward Sodom. The stage is set for one of the most dramatic events in Genesis. Perhaps the greatest lesson of Genesis chapter 18 is found in two simple truths. First, no promise is too difficult for me to fulfill. Sarah laughed because she focused on her limitations. I focused on my power. Second, righteous people are called to care about others. Abraham could have ignored Sodom. Instead, he prayed, he interceded, he stood in the gap. Faith is not only believing my promises, faith is also caring about people the way I care about them. Abraham demonstrated both, and because of that, he became an example for every generation that followed. If this story has deepened your understanding of Scripture, subscribe to Primordial Lore and continue exploring the greatest stories ever told. And now, continue to the next chapter, where two angels arrive in Sodom. Lot faces an impossible choice, and one of the most shocking judgments in biblical history unfolds before the eyes of the world.